In this video, we'll be taking a look at how you can work with materials in Blender. And I'm using the same scene file from the previous video. So if you didn't know how we ended up here, I would recommend watching the previous video. So to create materials in Blender, you go into this material tab in the properties editor with the object selected. And by default, we have this material here. So we're going to click on this minus icon to delete that. So let's understand how this works. In Blender, you can add multiple materials to a single object. And we have these two buttons here, plus and minus. You can click on plus button and it adds an empty material slot. And then you can click on this new button. It creates a new material and places that in this slot. If you click on this drop down, it's going to show you all the materials that you have in your 3D scene, and you can use one of the materials that you already have created. This is going to make more sense in a second. So let's go ahead and create a new material, and then you can either double click here or you can just click here and type in a name. So we're going to type in something like maybe our red material. So this is going to give us this red material. Let's go ahead and click on this base color and we can change it to red, and it's applied to our monkey, so you can see that it's updating in real time. So now that we have this applied, if we want to add a second material, we can click on this plus icon and it's going to add a new slot. Now I can either create a new material or I can click on this drop down and you can see that red material that we created is there. So I can select it and it's going to import the same settings. Now if I make change to the second material, since it's the same material, it's going to update across both of those. So if you use the same material on multiple objects, for example, if we select this base and then click on this drop down and select that material, and then we make a change, it's going to apply across all instances. So it's going to update across all the objects that's using the same material. So the material at the very top is going to be applied to your entire object, and then if you want to apply a different material, so let's go ahead and remove that. So we're going to click on this minus icon, so it's going to sort of unlink that material. We can create a new one, and let's call it green. And let's go ahead and change the color. So let's say that I want to apply this green material but only to certain parts of this object. To do that, we simply go into edit mode. So we go into the edit mode and then select the parts of the object that we want to apply this material to. So let's go to face selection mode and maybe select these eyes. And then with our material highlighted, we can click on assign, and it's going to assign material to that area. Now, if you want to select object based on the materials, that's pretty simple. So let's say that I want to select the area where I have this green material applied. So I can highlight the material and click on select, and it's going to select those faces. So if I grab those, you can see how it makes it really easy. You can deselect those, only the material area where this material is applied. Same thing with this one. So if we click, it's going to select everything except for that sort of eyes area. Now let's go through some of these icons here. So you can see that we have these materials, and down here we have some icons. So Blender is going to delete some of the unused materials if you save your file. If you want to sort of protect the material even if it's not used in your 3D scene, then you can click on this protection sort of shield icon. And another thing that you might want to often do is that, let's say that I created this new material slot, but I want to take settings from one of the previous materials that I already created. So in that case, I can say I need this red material, but now I want to sort of create a copy of this so that when I change the settings, it's not updated in the original material. In that case, I can click on this copy icon and it's going to create this red 001. So now it's a separate material. So if I make a change to it, you can see that it's not going to apply to the previous red material. So that's how you can sort of create copy and pick one of the previous materials as a starting point. Another thing that you might want to do is copy materials to multiple objects, and that's pretty simple. So let's say that I created a few more cubes like that. So let's create a few more copies. Now, if I want to copy materials from one of these objects, let's say that I want to copy this Suzanne materials to these rest of the objects, I can select all these objects and then select the Suzanne as active selection. And then I can click on this drop down and select copy material to select it. So you can see that it copied those materials to all these three objects. And another way to do this would be if I press Ctrl Z, select your object that you want to copy materials from as active selection, and then press Ctrl L to open the link menu and then select link materials. And it's going to copy those materials. Let's go ahead and get rid of this red material. So that's how you can sort of copy these materials. Okay, now that we know how we can add and remove materials, let's go through some more settings. So in material, we have a preview where we can change the type of preview that we want to see where our material is applied. And then usually I like to just preview my material in the 3D viewport, so I have this collapsed. And then we have surface. By default, we use the shader type, which is set to principal BSDF. Now this should be able to give you most of the results you need, like creating plastic materials, metals, and any kind of material that you would use normally, you'll be able to create them. For more complicated materials, you can use what is called the shader editor, and we're going to see that in a second. So here you can see that we have the base color. We can set the base color, or we can click on these icons and then we can select a different type of image that we want to use here. So if you want to use an image from your computer, you would use something like image texture. So you can click here and then you can select, you can create a new image and paint inside the Blender, or you can open image from your computer. So that's how you would sort of do that. And down here you can see we have metallic properties, so we can turn those on and it's going to make our object look more like a metal. Then we have the roughness slider. It allows us to make our object rough, or we can make it really smooth. So in this case, it's sort of reflecting everything. And you can see that there's this sort of dark background, so that sort of reflects off of this monkey head. To preview this better, I would recommend going into the material preview. It's going to give you a bit better result. So it's showing this black result because we set our image texture, but there's nothing in there. So we're going to go ahead and remove that. And let's reset this value. And an easier way would be to simply hover your cursor up here and press backspace. So now that we've removed that color, you can see that here's how we make our object metallic. And then here we have the roughness. So we can make it rough or less rough. And down here we have some more properties, like if you want to make it transparent, you can increase this transmission value, but then we have to reduce the metal. And it's going to make it look like a glass, and you can see that it's a frosted glass because we have a lot of roughness. As we remove the roughness, it's going to become like more clear glass. And you can also sort of play around with this emission. It makes it makes so that your object sort of emits light. It acts as a light. It's often used in sort of roof lights, where you want to sort of change a simple plane into look like that it's a light. And then you have this coat. This can be used in sort of adding an outer coat layer on your paint, usually used for cars and those kinds of things. So these are some of the basic settings for materials in Blender. And if you want to create more complicated materials, then you would add a new panel like this, and then change the editor type to shader editor. And by default, you can see that here we have our principal BSDF, but you can press Shift A, and then we have a lot of different type of materials. So this can be a really deep topic in itself. So there can be an entire course dedicated to creating procedural materials in Blender. So we're not going to dive too deep into this. But for example, if I want to sort of quickly create a gradient, I would go with color ramp and then add that, and we can sort of drag and plug these into the base color, and it's going to give us a gradient. Also, we need to change our emission slider, so let's open that. So this BSDF slider or property sort of mirrors the settings we have here, so it's the same as that. So inside emission, we're going to set this back to 0, and let's also reduce our transmission, because we don't want to have a transparent material like that. So now we have this gradient that we can play around with. So we can click here and we can change the color, and then on the other side we have the black color. We can change that, and the way it's gonna be applied to our object, we can use more nodes like texture coordinate node. So we can use that, and then we can combine it with something like mapping node. So again, as I said, it can be a bit complicated, but let's go with that, and we can link that into the position. And we want to use this object slider, and as you can see here, so now the black color is affecting sort of half of the object, and we can change this color to something like maybe blue. So now let's blend these two colors together, and we can sort of change how it's blending by using this mapping node. And the good thing about this is that it's all procedural, so you can very quickly and easily change any of these properties and change the look of your material in comparison to the materials that you'll sort of create in other programs and then bring it into the Blender. So that's how you would sort of use the shader editor. And finally, before we wrap up, here we have this tab called World, and it allows you to change the image that you'll be using inside your world when you're in the render mode. And you can also access that these same settings by clicking here in the shader editor and selecting World. By default, you can see that we have this background that we can click and change. So as we change that, you can see how it changes that. But we can remove this and we can add an environment map. So again, let's type that in here. So environment texture, and we can link that into the surface, and you can see that it immediately becomes pink. And a really good source to get these images is using this website called Polyheaven, and it's going to give you a lot of these HDRI images, and you can also get a lot of good textures. So let's click on browse HDRIs, and they have a lot of these, and you can download all of these for free. So let's say that I want to get this sort of sunny HDRI image. So here we have the resolution. Let's go with something low for now. So let's go with 2K, and you can use HDRI or EXR. Both extension works. Let's go with 4K, so that is a little bit better. So the size of the image goes up significantly. Let's click on that. Okay, now that I've downloaded that image, we're going to go ahead and open that up. So on my desktop, I have a folder called HDRI, and I've downloaded that there. So I'm going to select that and select open image, and it's going to bring that in, and you can see it's just like the material preview, but now we're using it in rendering. Now, even if we remove these lights that we created in Blender, our scene is still going to be lit up by that HDRI. And you can also change that to color and other things like that, just like we had here. So these are some of the basics of setting up materials in Blender.